Hey everyone, welcome to Extra Hours, After Hours, our office hours. It's very complicated here, but welcome to Extra Hours here. Of course, I'm Alex Lindsay, and sitting in for Grant today. We've got, coming from all over the globe here, we've got Ryan Summerfield. Hey Ryan, good to see you here.
Hey Alex, good to see you too.
Carl Asmussen. Hey Carl.
Good afternoon.
Muddy Schlegel. Hey Muddy.
Good to be here.
And Guy Cochran. Hey, Guy.
Hola, amigo. I'll be your reader today.
Excellent. I guess we'll just jump into the questions. Let's go ahead and jump into the first question.
Sure. First one's from our own Mike Muddy Schlegel in Raleigh, North Carolina. And he asks, I've installed a new Peplink B1 router, but it doesn't seem to play nicely with TP-Link unmanaged switches. Is there a list of approved switches? The only one I've found to work is a Netgear PoE switch.
I will admit that if I'm buying less expensive hardware, all I get is Netgear. So I don't have I have gotten some TP-Link routers in the past, and I find that the TP-Link stuff all wants to work together, or it doesn't seem to play well with others. That's been my experience. And as a result, I'm slowly weeding out. I have the last last TP-Link stuff that I ever bought is about to be hopefully taken out today or tomorrow, just because I got tired of dealing with the kind of things that you're talking about. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and I was hopeful that was the case. So, but in my testing, a small Netgear unmanaged, all the switches I have are unmanaged switches, and a small Netgear switch wasn't working. Only the PoE one was.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I had some hope, so I went and bought several just 8-port Netgear switches, $50 switches just to test. And they didn't work either. So for some reason, it's not passing DHCP through unmanaged switches. So not sure what to do except just keep buying and testing switches till I find one that works. And
Bo Cordell says, "What do you mean that it doesn't work with the TP-Link unmanaged switch? So what's it just doesn't see anything. It's just not, the switches act as if nothing's happening."
Yeah. So the devices that are connected to the switch don't get, even when I power cycle. So fortunately, I reached out on the Discord a few days ago, and Jonas jumped in and spent several hours with me troubleshooting. And the devices that were connected to the switch, even when I power cycle the switch, they're not getting the right IP addresses. They're getting addresses that are not even in the right domain, basically. And the router doesn't see those devices either. And what's odd is when I power cycle it, it sees them for a moment, and then they disappear. And the
Peplink is the Peplink is new.
The Peplink is new. Everything else worked previously with an old dual WAN router. So,
and have you made sure that the firmware on the Peplink is all the way updated?
I have, and in fact, I suspected that the Peplink, after extensive testing, I suspected the Peplink maybe was faulty, and so I actually ordered a new. I replaced the Peplink with an identical one, and I have to say, I was able to export the configuration and import the configuration, which made the setup of the new one a breeze.
Yeah,
my family appreciated because I was offline.
I will say, if I'm having trouble with a piece of hardware, the one thing I would never do is move one configuration to another. That would be like I can tell.
Okay,
my history with
fair.
that.
That's fair.
My history with that is that I had a broadcast truck. I didn't own the broadcast truck. I was renting the broadcast truck. And we were running we had 2 generators. These are big cat generators that were feeding the truck. And we had a primary and a backup. And one, I may have told the story in the past in office hours, but I'll tell it quickly here. The client didn't want to pay for both of them running all day while we were doing rehearsals because an extra $6,000 a day. So we said, okay, well, at 3 o'clock in the morning, we'll turn on the backup so that we have both of them running for the day of the event. 6 a.m. we're going to turn on the backup for the day of the event. at 3 a.m., the head gasket blew on the first one and it just dropped the truck out. Now, Cat, being as, trying to make it look good, plugged it into the backup, turned it on, and hard started the truck. And so the truck came up and it was all working just fine. But what then happened is we were like, well, we should get a new Cat generator and put it back into place. And I didn't think that was even possible in the morning. So I gave Cat like an impossible problem, which was, okay, if you can be here by 9:15, it's 11 o'clock show. If you can be here at 9:15, we can turn the truck down and turn it back up and make it go, which I should have never done. But how do you say we don't want, if Cat's sitting there offering you one, how do you say, no, we don't want it? And then that one goes bad and it's in the middle of a $7 million show. Bad things will happen, so it was I was kind of caught, and I have to give them some way to do it. So they got 9:14, literally. They're there with the generator. So we turn the truck down, turn it back up again. Now it had a Harris router in it. And the Harris router has two controllers, it's a 256 by 256 Harris router. And it's now owned by Evertz or something like that. But anyway, it'll copy from one. This is why I don't copy things. It'll copy from one card to the other to sync them. What happened was hard started, it corrupted one card. And when it came back up, the corrupted card corrupted the other card. and then I had no router. And so then, it's 9:30 in the morning, an hour and a half before the show. And I have no router. I have everything else in the truck is working, but there's no way to route signals. We got it working we still started on time, but only because we had an incredible EIC and a TD that basically hard routed everything to the Sony switcher that we were sitting in there. But the reason I bring that up is that's a perfect example of, like copying, like anytime a Mac says, do you want to move from this Mac to another Mac? I'm like, no, thank you. Like I'll just set that new Mac up piece by piece, because I'm always afraid that I will bring idiosyncrasies from one device to another. So if it wasn't working, you got a new one, I think that it would be hard to know whether because the highest probability is that something's wrong in your configuration file. Like so copying it from one to the other could be the thing that would do it. Now that's my 2 cents. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I always like to start back at factory pure reset. And in the chat, Jeff Keithley had mentioned that one of the ports may be assigned to trunking instead of access. So you might want to double check. And so when you say that the Netgear worked, looking at the unit itself, did you plug it into the same exact port? Because it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4 that are LAN ports. Did you plug the Netgear into the same port that the TP-Link was plugged into?
Yeah, I have. And we looked at adjusting the ports from access to trunk as well, and that didn't seem to do it either. But what I haven't done is and I agree, the most likely problem is a configuration problem. And so what I haven't done is go back to a full factory reset and kind of recreate the configuration with the new device. If I'm testing that there was something wrong with the original device, because having looked at it, having Jonas looked at it, and I actually submitted a ticket as well, and the folks from PepLink within 24 hours were able to log in and access it as well. And the only thing they asked is switching it back to trunk to see if that helped, which it didn't. So, but anyway, I may. And
then when you say that the Netgear worked, did you have that? So it was getting the correct IPs when you used the Netgear. So that one was a managed or an unmanaged switch?
They're all unmanaged. So, but it's a PoE switch, which I don't think should make a difference. But my unmanaged basic Netgear business switches didn't work, but the Netgear PoE switches do work, and they're all unmanaged. So it's a bit of a mystery.
Yeah, I can't think of why.
Yeah, you're gonna have to follow up with us now if you get this solved, because I'm curious. I don't own any PepLink products, but I've been on set with them, and if they're have a propeller head engineer that is running them, then they seem to work perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and what I will say is that I submitted a question several weeks ago about having. Was it a problem having multiple routers kind of upstream and downstream of each other? And resoundingly, the answer was yes. You only want to have one router in the pipeline. And so this has solved a lot of problems. So ultimately, I love this router, and I've taken several other pieces out of the system, trying to simplify and streamline. And ultimately, the router is staying. The router is good, even if I have to swap out, other switches and other parts of the system. But having two 1 gig fiber coming into the house, this gives me so much more power and stability managing those two. So ultimately, it's going to be awesome when I get this fully resolved.
Out of curiosity, if you plug in a laptop directly into the same port out on the Peplink, is that working as well?
Yeah, that works just fine.
And John Wallace said, you can have multiple routers, you just don't want to have multiple NATs. And then Jeff Keithley also said, but if the Peplink router is not set up correctly, then the simpler switches are not going to send the correct VLAN. So that's but right now you don't have that. You don't have multiple routers. You have that one router. And I will admit that we have been able to get, in the past with Peplinks, I have been able to put them into states pretty quickly that I couldn't, that they were unusable until someone smarter than me came in and fixed them. So they are, with great power comes great responsibility. They're very powerful routers. They're great routers. I've got one sitting, I don't know, it's almost out of arm's length here. So I mean, they're good routers, but it is possible, because they have so much configurability. They're so configurable, to get them into a state where none of the ports work the way you expect them to. So the people who use them generally are smarter than me about those things. So, well, if next time you're on, or let us know even during the morning show or whatever, let us know if you found a solution, because it's very curious. Especially when you said you spent hours with Jonas, I was just kind of like, okay, this is deep problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Jonas is the kind of person that I would talk to going, hey, can you fix this? I broke it. So yeah. All right. Interesting. Next question.
Curious, Alex, where you're at and your approach to this. I know you had looked at getting some Ubiquity gear, and I know that Mickey and some of these guys had said don't get any Ubiquity gear, but I'm finding for home and small business, and so is Grant, that the Ubiquity stuff, as far as a true machine router. It's
been good and bad. So I have Ubiquity now.
You got it? Oh,
I got it. It's sitting behind me. So I got the modem. I'm glad I bought the modem. So Comcast had this deal. Well, they didn't have a deal. You have to learn that you have to call Comcast every 2 years when your membership's up and say, I want to leave. And then they go, well, how do I make this work? And then they give you something more for the same price. That's typically what happens, is that there's some deal that they didn't tell you about. They're not going to tell you. They're not going to give you more for nothing. So we were like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so then they gave us a deal for, instead of paying $125 for, instead of paying $115 for 1 gig and 40 up, we could pay $75 and get, or $85 and get 2 gigs down and 300 up or 400 up, right? That was the new deal, right? So pay less. So we did it. And first of all, they took off the unlimited, connection for,
Got to read the fine print. They get you. They get you.
Well, my wife called them and they sorted that out. So anyway, I don't know what she said, but but we pay $30 more. There's like a $30 thing. So we're back to the same price that we were at before for Comcast. But now we are supposed to get 2 gigs by 400. Then I wasn't getting that. I wasn't testing it. I restarted it. I told them I have a surfboard. And they said, no, it just don't work. It actually doesn't work at your house. And I was like, I went through all that trouble so that it would work at my house, but I can't ask them to go backwards because I'm not paying anymore. So it was kind of like one of those things like, okay. And so anyway, with the new modem, I had to call them, give them the MAC address. Jason Bache was actually over here on Wednesday and helping me get this all set up. The new modem, we got the MAC address, gave it back to Comcast, and there was some back and forth. And he got a little flustered, and he did something. I don't know what it was. Not Jason, but the guy on the other end. And he did something, and now it's 350 up. Like it was like whatever they told me was not true. Like that it wasn't possible. Like it was totally possible. But going through the process of getting that modem, I now have the bandwidth. I didn't care about the down. I didn't care about being any faster than a gig down. I just wanted more than 40 up because when I upload files, it takes a long time. I do a lot of big files. And so anyway, so the modem is there and the phone sees it. Here's where the really sad thing that I shouldn't, I'm embarrassed to talk about on the show, but I'm going to because I feel like I should be transparent. Getting ready for Jason, I set up I got the router, the Dream Pro, the Dream Pro or whatever.
Dream Machine Pro.
Dream Machine Pro. So I didn't need to get I didn't feel like I needed the PoE, and I didn't need so I didn't get the SE or the other one. And so I got that one. It's just one of those things. Jason's coming over. I want to have it sitting on one part of the desk, and then I want the other one where it had to be near. And it was kind of like a weird stretch. And then I was like, well, but I can just I can put the Ethernet in here, and it's not. I'll go get another Ethernet before Jason gets here, but I'm going to put this one in. I just put it across it, and then I grabbed one more thing as Jason was about to get there, and tripped over the Ethernet. It fell off the table, and there's only one way that could really fall badly. It's on its face when the Ethernet cable's in it. Because what it does is it just jams that Ethernet cable in. And in just in case you're wondering, we did some research. The Ethernet connection is on the board. So that's the end of that. So I ordered another one. I'm going to try to get it fixed, or I'll fix it or whatever. I mean, it's now like a art project at the moment, but I needed to get one. I'm trying to get this fixed. So I ordered another one. And the only thing I'm having trouble with is getting it, that initial, I plugged it in. I think I need to connect it to my computer and have my computer force the updates or something, the firmware updates. Because it's not like when I plug the modem into it and I see it on the phone wants to set it up. It just doesn't. It's just like I couldn't get a connection, even though the modem to my current system works fine. So it's not like the modem isn't getting internet. It's just not passing it to the other machine made by the same company. So anyways, but I literally got it this morning, and I plugged it in, and I spent a whole 15 minutes trying to figure it out, and it's not. So I'll probably have it figured out by tomorrow, I got a couple of, and I asked Guy, which Wi-Fi. So I got the 7s. 7 Pros. So I put a couple of those up, and I talked to a bunch of people. A lot of my friends use Ubiquiti hardware, and a lot of people in office hours use Ubiquiti, and a lot of other friends that I have that do some pretty heavy duty work. They use Meraki at work and Ubiquiti at home because they can't afford the Merakis. And so I feel like I've got a fair number of people that, between office hours and other friends that I have to help me figure it out. So anyway, because I'm lazy, I was asking Kevin, I was telling Kevin something. He was like, I'm afraid to ask the question because I haven't read the manual yet. I'm like, we created office hours so that people don't have to use manuals. so you can ask the question. Just ask the question. Just have people around you that can answer it. So anyway, so I'll probably have it up, again by tomorrow, most likely. So, and then I'll keep adding. It's a pretty cool system. It's pretty cool to see when you start getting stuff put together, and you see where everything is and how it's hooked up, and so.
Yeah, when Muddy said that he had 2 hours with Jonas, I was like, man, with a Dream Machine, I could not even spend 30 minutes and have it up and running. 2 hours with Jonas, I mean, if you were to bill out his time, I mean, you could buy a couple of Ubiquities. So, I mean, it's like, how much is your time worth on some of this stuff? Some of it can get pretty technical to where you waste more time than save money.
Well, yeah, and I'm going to build a wireless connection between my next investment will be getting the wireless connection between my house and my garage, which is a little ways from the house. So instead of I was going to try to figure out all the Ethernet to get there, and I don't know exactly how long that would take. And so I was just like, I'll just get one of the little point-to-points, because that's what I used Ubiquiti for a long time, was the point-to-points, because we would use them for, 10-mile, throws, the big full duplex ones that are big.
The air fiber.
Yeah, the air fibers. So, 1 gig symmetrical at 10 miles. so those are, I don't know, they feel magical when you use them, they're, and it's fun to tune them. And then and there's a whole lot of Google earthing and figuring stuff out and figuring out how many degrees and so on and so forth. So that was mostly my experience with Ubiquiti before this. So anyway, so more reports soon, but we're close now. Everything's sitting there and ready to go. Let's go to the next question.
All right, the next one's coming up from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas asks, which workflows would you see the SSL Big 6 fitting in?
Go ahead, Carl.
So the SSL Big 6 is pretty much my recommendation for nearly anyone that wants to record audio in what we call a project studio. So project studio, it can be a home studio or it can be a setup studio. So generally project studios record piece by piece. So this is the actual Big 6. So it has, as you can see on the top left here, 4 mic preamps built into it. So essentially you can record 4 simultaneous microphones, and that's kind of the standard for a project studio. So you're going to record usually 1 musician at a time, maybe 2, like maybe a guitarist and a singer at the same time. So 4 microphones would be perfect for that. And with project studios, if you're doing like bigger things, like you want trumpets, you want all these kind of things, you'd bring in them one by one. So you would schedule them to come in one at a time. It's actually much cheaper than trying to schedule everyone at the same time. Now, the Big 6 actually it's a 16 channel, or maybe 18 USB channel, I believe, or 16, maybe 16 or 18, USB in and out. So it does USB in, USB out from the computer. So it's also a digital interface, high resolution. So I think it's 96 or 192. So it's very high resolution. So excellent for recording, excellent for doing sampling stuff. But the console itself, the analog part it's really, the circuitry comes straight out of the SSL larger consoles, especially in the top right hand corner there's the bus compressor that comes straight out of the 4000. Now on the right here I've got a lunchbox. So this is a 500 series lunchbox, and what you see there are 8 what these are called 6s. So this is the actual preamp channel, or the actual channel from the Big 6 and the 6. There is a smaller mixer called the 6 that doesn't have USB, and they've just taken that and put it into a 500 module. So you can actually add 8 additional preamps to this particular mixer, console, whatever you want to call it. So you can have 12 preamps. They're all matched. They're exactly the same preamps. It's just they've been put into 500 modules instead of into the mixer. So if you want to record analog drums, you want to record an ensemble, then you just simply have this lunchbox. And this is kind of, SSL have really sought this out. It's very high quality, very low noise. It's $2,000. It used to be about $3,000. They're coming down to like $2,000 at the moment. So that's generally, it's an amazing price for what it is. This is kind of, if you're in that price range of like, I don't want to spend more than $5,000 on hardware for my studio, then this is kind of the mixer you'd want. So plus microphones, plus mic stands, plus everything else, of course, mic cables. So $5,000 probably be where you sit there. But this is it. This is like top of the top shelf for that kind of price range and for that many inputs. There's nothing else close to this. There's nothing that actually, no other company is making anything like this, because it's SSL just have all the ingredients and the way to do this. And it was $3,000 when it originally came out. It's now $2,000. But all the ingredients SSL make, no one really else makes these ingredients, and the 500 modules, and the fact you can add 500 modules, so you can add 8 additional channels with the exact same preamps. So this is for people who are interested in project studios, which is generally where you're not recording more than 4 live microphones that are simultaneously, maybe 6. This is perfect. Once you go to like a larger studio where you have like a whole band in at once, then you're into a whole different workflow. That's not a project studio. That's just a recording studio. But yeah, I would highly, highly, highly recommend this for someone who can afford $2,000 and they're interested in doing recordings. I wouldn't use this like in lieu of like a Flow 8 or a Rodecaster Pro. They're different. So Flow 8 and Rodecaster Pro are perfect for what we're doing here, perfect for small live gigs. You could use this for a live, but it's not designed for live. It's designed for recording. And the other part of this, which I didn't talk about, is a summing mixer. So because it has 16 USB back in at high resolution, you can actually use this as a summing mixer. You never want to usually mix, you generally want to avoid mixing audio channels in the computer digitally. You always want to mix them in analog space and then put them back to digital. So what happens is the computer will send out, let's say you have 8 tracks. It will send out those 8 tracks out to this mixer. They get mixed together down to 2 tracks. It's a stereo mixer. It gets mixed down to 2 tracks in your analog sphere. This has to do with harmonics and phase and all that. And then those 2 tracks go back out to the computer. So this is kind of very similar to how Pro Tools works. A lot of people use a summing mixer for Pro Tools. Pro Tools sends out all the channels to a summing mixer, which is an analog device. Digitally controlled though, so you can control it with your mouse and keyboard, but it's an analog device. And then it simply puts that back in. So there were musicians back in 2005, 2010 that did whole albums in the box, which means in the computer, and they actually went back and redid them, remastered them about 5-10 years later. And they're all done in Pro Tools, like the highest end equipment, like, $100,000, easily $100,000 worth of equipment to do this. But they would mix them, they literally mixed the channels in the box, in the computer. And they came back and said it doesn't really work. And these people had done, these people from the 90s who worked 100% analog, gone into the 2000s, gone to digital, found it much easier. Then the 2010s, they've gone back and simply just remixed them. So, and the cool thing with the automation is they can actually take that full automation they did from, like, say, 2005, do it in 2015, and just press go and it just works. So that's the cool thing about recording automation when you're mixing in Pro Tools, because Pro Tools will just remember that 10 years later and do that automation instead of in the box. In a digital mixer, it'll do it in an analog mixer, as long as that mixer, like a Sigma, is digitally controlled. But 2 thumbs up for this. Anyone who's thinking about recording at home and doing project recordings, yeah, this is the one I'd always choose.
Next question.
Next one's from Matthew LeConte in Oakland, California. And he asks, handling comms for 6 people on an upcoming production. Tricky part is the cam op needs comms and to monitor audio from mixer. Are there comms that can be in-ear to be less obstructive?
Good, Carl.
So the in-ear has to do with the hardware, like your in-ear headphones or headphones on top. As far as getting 2 things in, so you can actually use, just Unity. And there may be a slight delay with Unity, the latency. But with Unity, you can have one of the party lines being whatever you want from the mixer going into that party line for Unity. And that can be program or a particular mix you want the camera operators to hear. And then they, of course, can listen to a party line for the camera operators. And then, of course, for one-to-one messaging, they'll hear that as well. So I think for 6 people, I think Unity makes sense. You get 6 party lines, you get one-to-one messaging for everyone on board. They can just have you can have multiple party lines open for those camera operators, so they can hear program or whatever mix it is you want to send. The only thing I'd say if it's they're hearing, let's say they're hearing stuff from a stage and it's coming through, there may be a latency. So they may hear a slight delay for what their real ears are hearing from the stage in the room versus what they're coming through. But other than that, I think Unity would be the best solution for 6 people and having like 2 party lines open for the camera operators and not for other people anyway. So yeah.
Good guy.
Yeah, depending on the camera model too, if it has XLR in, you might be, and the camera operator doesn't need to actually talk. If they just need to listen, you could maybe feed it into one of the XLR ports somehow and then route it so that you have one ear that's program and one ear that's comms. That way it's a little less just of a mind thing where you can have the ability to adjust that level on the fly with controls that are at your fingertips. But then if you need to turn something down or you're just watching the VUs and it's no latency, because if it's coming in through the camera, it's fast. So something to think about. And then I like the bumblebees. They're little tiny. The only thing about them, they're so discreet that you can barely see them on a cam op, but the only thing is you really got to take care of the wiring before you deploy, because they're kind of something that takes a few minutes to really wire and get down your shirt and be discreet with them. Because it's like fishing wire, so it's so tiny that it's hard to manage. So just be aware that it's not like these Linsoles where you can just grab them and plop them in because the wire's so thick.
Good, Ryan.
Yeah, John Wallace in the chats came up with the same idea, but if the camera operators don't need to talk back to the director or whatever, you can just get yourself a single channel wireless IEM system and then just mix it in a console, give everyone a pack. That'll be 0 latency, very high quality audio, and high range. So that's another option as well.
Yeah, it depends on, and we've even used, one of the things that we've used for some of these have been, we had a bunch of Microflexes laying around. The Microflex actually has a mic as well as just a regular 1/8" jack in, and we use those for comms. You didn't usually use them for the camera operators. What we used them for is actually our kind of more like a VIP management person that was sitting there, because we could give them the nice little ear heroes and have it be very tight, and it was a really easy way for us to mix whatever we wanted into their headset there. But for comms, I think that Unity, you should be able to mix it in as program, like one of the program feeds, and then you could even pan it left or right on those program feeds. And so you would just be able to deliver the program feed to Unity and be able to do that. And you should be able to do that with Unity, with Bolero, with with any of the major comm systems. Adding the program in should be something, and then that gives the user also control over and for many of these, right, left, as well as volume of that as it relates to all the other comms that they're listening to. Yeah, good guy.
Yeah, just as a cam op, I like to have my hands where they're going to be on the body of the camera, on the lens. I don't want to be messing around with a phone. I don't want to be touching stuff. So a lot of times, especially if you do need to talk, we're often in loud environments. So if you opened up the mic and you're in front of stage monitors during a concert, like you would just blow all the comms away. So a lot of times the director would just say like, hey, nod with your camera, like for yes or no, you just, yes, no. So you don't actually have to have the cam op talk. You can just have them wiggle the camera or, tell them. So you can
Most of the time
in
that
other
works.
ways than just voice. Yeah.
Most of the time that works. When we've had some technical issues, there have definitely been times there's a lot of times we give camera ops just listen only, and we don't bother to give them anything with a headset. We just have one that listens for exactly the reason the guy's talking about. There are times when we have a technical issue or we're trying to sort something out where we really wish we could talk to the camera. like what is going on? Because there'll be something like you see something not working with the camera, and you know that they're struggling with something. You just don't know what it is, and so being able to talk to them. And I admit most of the, for us, for most of the shows that 090 does, we're using Free Speaker Bolero for everything. Like it's just one of those two everybody's got those, and so it just depends on, so the Unity stuff that we do is typically only stuff that we're the online, we use Unity for online connections. Once we get into the room, we're usually putting on, headsets with more traditional comms, more traditional wireless comms. Next question.
Next one's in from Muddy, and Muddy is in Raleigh, and he asks, what tech do you use in your holiday decorating?
Good, Carl.
So one I set up, I've set this up twice actually. I've done it two different ways. So one I did probably 20 years ago now, and the other one I did probably about, it was just before COVID, so I guess it may have been 19 or 18. So the one I did a long time ago was someone had a house, with their lights, and the lights were sequential to music. And so how do people who go looking for these houses, they travel around in groups and they go look at these houses and see the displays. How do they hear the music? Because you have ordinance laws about not playing music at night to all your neighbors. So I helped them set up an FM transmitter, and they just had a sign on their front lawn and said what frequency to tune into. That's it. So simply people just rocked up. So 20 years ago, it wasn't uncommon to have FM receivers still around. So even mobile phones had FM receivers, 20 years ago. So it was quite easy to do that. System where you could actually just have, and there was no latency, of course, because it's actually speed of light. So people could actually just use an FM receiver, a little, whatever they had, a little Walkman, whatever, and they can listen to the music that's synced up to and this is how fireworks displays still work to this day pretty much, is they still broadcast on FM because any internet-based music would have a latency of at least, 1 second, 2 seconds, even if it's the lowest latency you could possibly get. And then what I did later on, this was back in 1819, Sennheiser has a Bluetooth broadcaster. Now you can also do this from a Mac, so you can send the same audio signal to multiple Bluetooth headsets from a Mac. But the thing is, it has to be done on the computer side. Someone can't just go into it. Sennheiser has this device that allows you to actually just, as long as you pair it, it'll pair to anyone who's asking to pair it. So you'll have to have it paired, and it'll simply just pair automatically. So you can have this kind of auto pair. So whenever a Bluetooth device shows up, you'll just do an auto pair. And it maxed out at, I think it was 8. So it could do 8 broadcasts out to 8 different Bluetooth, but you have to set up in the software to say automatically pair when it sees a new, whenever something goes into pairing, automatically pair. And then it drops off if it's not an audio device. So it's kind of weird, but it works quite well. I think Sennheiser still sell it. And there's Bluetooth technology. So the actual official Bluetooth website talks about how this technology works. I know there's ones that can go up to 64 now. This is for people who want to do cinema stuff, but you need the headphones and the receiver. But that's a whole other thing. So yeah, so mine, what I did twice, and for analog and digital, I guess with Bluetooth, was synchronizing sound so people could listen to it and watch the house displays. And all you got to do is have a little sign that tells people what to do, how to hear the sound without putting, a PA system on your front lawn.
Go ahead, Muddy.
Yeah, and I figured the way some of this community has decorated for Halloween, there would have to be some people out there who go all out for the holidays. Really, it's not very advanced, but it's convenient, is just smart outlets, smart switches, right? Just being able to turn outdoor lights, particularly on and off, either by command from a phone or on a schedule. So not very advanced, but certainly convenient when it's getting cold outside.
Next question.
Next one's coming in from Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri, and he asks, in the U.S., T-Mobile is offering their home internet service at a reduced price to be used as a backup to your regular ISP. Thoughts?
Sure. I mean, depends on how much it is. Depends on where you live and how well T-Mobile works where you live. Given that it's going to be your house, you really have to know. Get a friend over to see. T-Mobile is hot and cold in the U.S. and so one of the funny things about side effects of having a live view is you get really conscious to where things are working and not working, and so you just get to watch all the antennas do what they're going to do, and the ones that you don't bet on are the T-Mobile ones. Like, just to be totally flat, I mean, they're just not. You just don't know whether they're really, when they work, it feels like they're going to work great. Like if you get a lot of, they're going to work great. It doesn't feel like a lot of people are using them. They're it's hit and miss. It really depends on where you live. Go ahead, Carl.
So I have this exact setup here. So my backup is Vodafone. So my retail, so I've got NBN. So this is a government sponsored internet here in Australia, which is fiber to, well, mine's fiber to the curb. I've got 30 feet of coax, but other than that, it's fine. My speeds are about half a gig. If I wanted to go to that plan, I choose not to though. So what I have is, if the NBN goes down, essentially if the NBN, if the modem, or say technically, if the Vodafone router that has, it's a 3G, 4G built in. So essentially it just has a 4G modem built in, well, actually 3G and 4G modem, but the 3G is being turned off now, so in Australia. But so the 4G modem built in. So if it loses the WAN signal from the modem, it will simply just, well, within a few seconds, it'll switch over to the 4G. I don't pay an extra for this. It's essentially, it's designed to do this. And then when the NBN comes back and it has a WAN signal come back, so the fiber coax, well, it's called a hybrid connection. Once my hybrid connection comes back, it'll just switch off the 4G. I don't really notice it. It's like, it has happened sometimes. NBN will have upgrades and stuff like that, so that technically my hybrid connection will just go out and I won't even notice it because, it goes over to the 4G. Maybe I'll see a YouTube video stall, because when it's switching over, it will stall a YouTube video, and then once it picks up, it works fairly fine. It's good for emergencies. I wouldn't use it for production. I wouldn't use it for work, so I wouldn't do that. Sometimes I have used it. I've intentionally unplugged my hybrid modem to use it. I found that the reason why is because that's how it actually updates the modem. So the actual, not really the modem, technically the router. So the router from Vodafone can only be updated if it's connected directly via Vodafone connection to its servers. So and that'll only happen if it's doing the 4G. So I'll unplug the NBN one, it goes onto 4G, and then in the background I can notice it's actually just updating the firmware in the router, the Vodafone router, and then I plug back in the NBN and it's all done. In theory, I can manually go in and do that, but it's much easier just to unplug the NBN for 5 minutes. It does it, and then plug it back in. So that's the only thing I've noticed. But it's good for emergencies. It's good for, like, I still got to send emails. I still got to, do that kind of stuff. It'll, YouTube is fine. Like, it's 4G, so it's not a problem, and it's a stationary 4G. So it's pretty strong signal, and I'm in an urban area, so it's not a problem. But be aware that it's that backup, that 4G or the T-Mobile backup, for instance. It's really just there to keep the internet ticking over until your main internet connection comes back online for whatever reason.
Good guy.
Yeah, it depends on a couple things. One is what's at stake. So if it's just your day-to-day stuff, then probably fine. But I remember when our downtown location had an outage, and it was pretty bad because we thought we would just use a bunch of these cellular modems, and so we stuck them all over the place. But everybody else had the same idea, so cellular just slowed to a crawl. So be aware that if this is a backup, that everybody else is going to flip it on at the same time. So here I have one main fiber input coming in, and luckily I have an alternative, which is Comcast, and so that's my backup, and I ditched their modem and just got that plan where I can just pay $80 a month, and it's 1 gig down and like 40 up. But that's the thing, is how fast do you need that up to be? So some people in the chat are talking about Starlink. Be aware that there's 3 different models. There's a high performance, which will give you faster bandwidth and greater availability, but the thing's pretty dang big. And then you got the regular dish, which is up to Gen 3 now, which is going to be faster than the mini. So the mini is small and portable, and you could even use USB little bricks to power that thing. And it's cute, but just be aware that you're not going to get the performance of the bigger models. So while you're getting the benefit of portability, you're paying for it with the price of, well, also make sure that if you're going to do the unlimited plan at $160 a month, because you don't want to have this as a backup and be on the 50 gig plan for $60 a month and then go over like crazy that 1 month. So just be aware, and you can pause the thing as well. So just depends on what it is that you want to do and what your budget is and how much is at stake if you fall down. Because like mine just fails over within a sec. Like I could be on a Zoom call, you could unplug my Ethernet cable and it'll warble for a second, but it'll come back. I've done it. It fails over so gracefully. And that's the thing, is having something like a PepLink where it fails over so gracefully. So you don't put it on aggregate, you put it on failover. So it just falls right into play and just goes. So you don't want aggregate, because that'll merge the two together and you could get packets arriving late and all that stuff. So if you have something that bonds the two, just make sure that you have it on pure failover.
Next question.
Next one is Tony Mobley, and he asks, is there a way to bring along regular people to improve? Still seeing people being interviewed on TV that still need a lot of work based on office hours standards.
Go ahead, Carl.
So something I've noticed in the past month, I guess, with all the news coming out of the United States, is there's two camps. So you have the mainstream media who are bringing in contributors who are remote, and you're right, they're coming in from laptops on a desk, they're looking up the nose, and that's how the mainstream media are bringing them in. But yet independent media, that's generally web-based, they're bringing in other contributors, and these other contributors generally have their own web-based show or whatever, and they're actually coming in, they're actually all looking very similar to us. Not all, but a lot of these web-based ones, essentially podcast and online news outlets, independent outlets, when they bring in a remote contributor, I'm noticing that they're coming in from their own little home studio, or they're coming in from something else, and it actually looks closer. I'd say both people in that conversation, or all people in that conversation, look similar, how we look here in office hours. So I know it's just mainstream media that is not asking the contributor to do anything. They're not even getting the person to put like their laptop on a few books to make their eye level. They're really those producers that are setting up these remotes, and they're just using the built-in microphone. Like, don't get me started on some of these microphones here. But I'm noticing that with the independent media who are web-based, podcast-based, those kind of things, their contributions are equal to the level. And I think that's because it's just a big network of people who are doing independent media via, streaming online and via.
Yeah.
And it's just really well.
Yeah.
It's done really well.
Yeah, I think it's complicated. So I've had some discussions, because obviously this is a big complaint of mine, that broadcast looks so bad all the time. And what's interesting is that we brought people on. We've brought a lot of people onto Michael Krasny's show and for other things that we've done that spend a lot of time on traditional media, and they will tell us over and over and over again, no one ever told me. Like when we show them what the difference is between having a real mic and the mic and the non-mic that they're using, or the really bad mic that they're using, they're just like, no one told me that it looked this bad or sounded this bad, because they're not going back and looking at their hit on broadcast. They get brought in, they say the thing, and they go back to what they were doing. And some of them, I mean, we've had ones that are doing 5 or 6 hits a day for months, because it's something around what their level of expertise is, and suddenly they're really busy, and we're in the middle of all of that, and they literally, when we send them the mic, they go, "Can I just buy this mic from you?" And we're like, no, you have to send that one back. Like, we can't. You have to buy your own or whatever. We've been trying to figure that out. We're thinking about getting to a point where we just send them the MV. We're trying to get a good deal on like the MV6s and just send people MV6s to make that work, because it just sounds so much better. So I talked to a producer about it, and there are some arguments that I understand a little bit. One thing that they pointed out, because I said exactly what Carl was talking about, which is that how are all these online folks doing it so well with no budget, and you guys have millions of dollars and you're not doing it? He goes, well, we don't have millions of dollars. He goes, some shows have millions of dollars, but most of the shows don't. And then we're just getting by, and they're doing one show a week, or one show every day, or one show every one. We've got 40 of these that we got to do today. There's just their 8-minute hits, and they're disposable. No one's ever going to see them again. And it's all moving through the system, and we have a handful of people, and we don't have time. We can't send everybody mics, because we need them to figure this out. But so the real impetus where we have to kind of get to is, how do we get to people who are doing it and having them understand that it undermines they have to be selfishly, like, if you're a congressperson or an expert, you have to know that it's important for you to look good and sound good. I I very much think when they were looking at regulating the social networks, there was a moment where they were trying to interrogate Mark Zuckerberg and Sundar and they were trying to they're trying to interrogate them. And the problem is that they looked so good, effortlessly. Like, they're probably sitting in a set. Like Sundar's probably had a set in Google that looks like a kitchen. Like, so it doesn't look like he's working hard, but he is. And then they were sitting there trying to explain themselves to people who were really not working on it. I mean, these are the senators and the congressmen and everything else. And they're asking not very good questions, but more importantly, they had like huge backlights and weird things, and they were in a weird space in their house and all this other stuff. And they just got eviscerated. And I actually think that was half of that problem, was that they looked so bad and sounded so bad. And they were up against people who knew how to do this, who had teams that knew how to do this, and who had been doing this for years, and so I think that was, so I think it's really important, if you want to get your ideas across, that you look and sound like we do in office hours and like social media people, because they understand what that needs to look like. But the onus lives in the participant, because the broadcasters just don't have the time to process them. I mean, it was pointed out to me that, for a long time, we were just calling and having people we just put a picture of them up and they were talking on their phone, and they still do that for NPR, which I can't listen to anymore. I just can't listen to people talk on the phone anymore. And so that is, that's the hard part, is that we have to educate not the broadcasters, but really the people showing up on broadcast. And then how do you do that? Like, how do you get to them? Like, how do you even talk to them? That's the challenge. There's not like a group of people that you can find. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, this is such a tough one, because a lot of people, even like Mark Cuban, he's popping on all the time, and I look at him and he's got a few bucks, so it's not that he can't afford a system. I think a lot of them just say it's good enough, and to them, they don't care. We think of it as a suit, and we want to show up and be presentable, and especially when we're with a peer group that has this stuff that looks and sounds very good. But as I watch some of these webinars where somebody even like Salesforce or Zoom themselves, when they do Zoomtopia, they have all these folks that just come in with simple cameras. Seeing the new MacBook Air, I'm super impressed with that setup. I mean, just the camera, the audio, it comes across very well. I've been showing off this thing called the Ivy, which to me, the whole eye contact piece of the puzzle, it's a solve when you can look into a teleprompter, because 90% of communication is looking at somebody's gestures, their eyes, and hearing the tone of their voice. So being able to have good audio and good video and be able to see and look somebody in the eye, I mean, it's just such a game changer. So I have a teleprompter that's a 17-inch, so I'm blessed to have this thing, and I can't imagine life without a teleprompter all this time, because it just made my life, like, for doing these, a different stratosphere.
Yeah, and so there are some companies that totally get it, and they build up, all their executives have really good kits. I mean, they're using, I know one company, pretty big company, is using all Sony, they're using like A7s or something like that, that everybody gets, and what happened was, is someone that they worked with had one, and they were like, okay, we can't be up, staged by these guys, by these jokers, I think was the thing. so like, how do we make this all work? So I do think that, but it's oftentimes someone, and I think that's also important. Why it's important for us when we're doing shows is to make sure. I think sometimes there's a temptation to us, well, we're not going to be on air, to not have this thing. But I very rarely, if I'm not in my studio, I just call in. Like I don't. Excuse me. I just call in. I don't do it any other way. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Ben Bedward in New Glarus, Wisconsin, and he asks, is there a way to get Omniscope to see USB-C input from the A10 Mini Pro?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so I've just loaded up on Omniscope here. In theory, you should just better grab the USB there and click and go. But while that will work, if you're trying to use it for scopes, the output on the USB-C will be crushed in terms of like blacks and whites and that kind of thing. So you're not going to get an accurate representation of what you're actually getting out of there. So I would suggest going HDMI out of the A10 Mini into a capture card like a Magewell or even a Camlink or something to actually get more accurate things to look at before you go into Omniscope.
Yeah, yeah. The Omniscope can definitely see it, but it definitely is crushing the blacks because that's the nature of what comes out of all the Blackmagic products. The way that their chipset's working is not congruous with everything else. so with everything else that's looking at it. So that's the challenge there. But it should be able to see it. Mine sees it. I'm looking at it right now. So it's an interesting puzzle. I don't know why it wouldn't see it at all, but it may not be seeing it as accurately. It is seeing it the way most online tools see it, except for Zoom, because Zoom corrects for that. Next question.
Next one in from Jeff Veely in Henderson, Texas, and he asks passwords and 2-factor and 3-factor authentication. When will the madness end, and how can we take to save time?
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I don't think it is going to end. If anything, it's probably going to get worse. But one thing I've just implemented in our company has as well is we now run 1Password, so number 1 password. And one of the nice things about it is that in a team, for example, you can share passwords between team members. So we have a bunch of show accounts and we share them all. But you can also put multi-factor authentication in that as well. So rather than having just one phone with the multi-factor, having the one-time password in that as well. Anyone can pull that up. That's on that thing, and even when you're loading it in a browser, for example, it'll just drop it straight in once you've got the plugin all set up. So it's a nice little tool for that. It's not going away, but anything we can do to make it easier is helpful.
Yeah, I mean, passkeys, I think, are going to be something that you're starting to see more and more of, which is that 2-factor authentication essentially with your phone. So Apple's doing it. Google's working on it as well. Apple's a little ahead, but both of them are coming up to speed. I think when Microsoft is working on it as well. So the idea is that it just says, do you want to just use your phone? And you just kind of point your phone and look at it, and then you're in. B&H uses it. Apple uses it. More and more folks you're starting to see that passkey show up. So I think passkey is most likely the thing. Passkeys are things that are related to passkey. But I think that this is, as we move forward, biometrics are going to become more and more important. And, I think that passkey is part of that biometric feedback, but I think you're also going to find social networks and all kinds of other things start to require you to check in. They're not going to acquire your information, but they need you to prove that you are whoever you say you are, like that. And without that, they won't let you in, because I think that there's so much chaos going on in social media, so much chaos going on. They're going to want to start confirming that you're not a bot, and then you're not someone other than who you say you are. It doesn't matter who you are, as long as you are who you are. And you can call yourself whatever you want, but you're going to have to start connecting your biometrics to that. I think in the next 10 years, you're going to see more and more of, we don't want any AI. We don't want any bots. We don't want any, there's going to be a group of social media that, not the current ones, they're going to start giving people the opportunity to kind of check out of that experience. But it'll be very connected to biometrics within your mobile device. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, a few years ago, AWS actually gave us these things for free, and I've since gotten a few different models, but this is called a YubiKey, and it's a hardware key that when it asks for the password, you just touch it, and it activates it. So this one's a full-size USB-A, but I also have little tiny ones that are USB-C. I mean, they're so small. They're really slim and low profile, so you can't have them on your laptops as well. So that's something to take a look at, is the YubiKeys.
Next question.
Next one's coming in from Bo Cordell, and he asks, I may have the opportunity to build out an office studio soon. If you had a 15 by 20 room, what would you do?
Go ahead, Carl.
So this could be like, a whole second hour, but I'll keep it to just one suggestion. So if it's actually an office with a drop ceiling, then getting Matthews, the scissor clamps that will go into the drop ceiling, or Impact, or whichever brand you want, they'll hold about 10 kilos. You want to make sure you put them near the anchor points in the drop ceiling. So pop up the tile and drop ceiling, make sure where the anchor points are, where it's actually connected to the actual ceiling itself. So put them in. And then the light, I'd suggest, now they make different brands of these. I'm going to show you the Godox one. So this is the Godox one. So this is a flexible light. As on the right of this picture, you can actually see how thin and light it is. And you can actually see where the baby baby pin is that will go into that ceiling thing. This is in a vertical mode. Obviously, if you're in an office, you're in a horizontal mode, and it turns into very similar to television lighting. This actually does come, you can get a softbox and a grid for this. So if you want to stop light from going everywhere, because this will obviously give you 180 degrees of light from this. As I said, there are other brands, Aperture make these as well. So whichever brand, this is 1 foot by 4 foot, so it's quite large. You only probably need 2 of these as far as your front lights. And then you can have 1 of these behind the person as a hair light. And again, it only comes down from the ceiling by 1 foot, because this is only 1 foot high, 12 inches high. It's very lightweight because it's just fabric with LEDs imprinted into the fabric. It's obviously flexible. So my one suggestion is look at this kind of system from whichever manufacturer you choose. These are around $300 to $400, depending on who you go with. Obviously, this has V-mount. You see the little power supply down there. It actually has a V-mount as well, so you can run off battery if you need to. You can put it on a light stand, as you can see on the right here. But there are many other suggestions I would suggest, but this is one where you can have it permanently set up. People can walk in and out of the office. They won't notice it so much. It's very slim. It's very discreet. It uses very little power as well, so you can actually run it all from one electrical socket. You're not going to blow anything because you're not bringing in like 2,000 watts of light. So this would be my suggestion for an office with a drop ceiling. It doesn't have to have a drop ceiling. You can have other setups, of course. This is very lightweight, but that would be my one suggestion. There's 100 other suggestions I would give as well, but that's one I would start with.
Good guy.
Yeah, lots of stuff. Power would be the first one to start out with. Make sure you have sufficient power, depending on how much that you're going to be doing in there. You may need to add another panel or other circuits, dedicated circuits. The other thing is HVAC, how loud it is it, and how fast can you get that air out of there if you do have big production and a bunch of warm bodies in there, or the opposite on a hot day. You have just a lot of machines going, and so you need that heating and cooling taken care of. And of course, your internet, and then the internet backup, and lots of wiring already pre-installed in the wall. So if you have that opportunity to build it out from scratch, I would make sure to put power, Ethernet, fiber, and then if you can't, even ports so that you can conduit, so you could just run bare stuff through the walls at a later date. Sometimes you even put them behind the walls if you want, and then just mark them off for later exposure if you just need to cut it in and get even more stuff through. So be aware that there are things that you can do, like soundproofing ahead of time, so that you're doing either extra thick, like double drywall, or floating a floor. It just comes down to how much money and how much production you're actually going to be doing in there, and is it just you or more people? Because and then what's the cost of the gear, and who's going to know that you're there? Because some of the security stuff, cameras and shielding your windows with film, and there's just lots of stuff that you can do on the security front to make sure that the stuff doesn't walk away.
Good, Mike.
15 by 20 and an unlimited budget. No, it takes me back to some of those $20,000 studio conversations. But I'll just share 2 tips. And I like what Carl was talking about, and what it reminded me of. Even though 15 by 20 is some space and some elbow room, as much as you can keep things off the floor, I've found that to be a big advantage, and allowing the space to be used in more flexible ways. The other thing that I've done along the same lines, and this is the other suggestion, is having a really sturdy platform, sit-stand desk that things can be mounted to. And so, and as much as possible, having things on wheels to allow you to use the space in different ways, but having everything mounted to the desk as much as possible, especially if it's sit-stand, allows you, it just kind of moves with the desk. Cameras and gear and lights and everything and monitors move with the desk. So just some things to help keep the space as flexible as possible.
Yeah, mine's close to the same size. And so I'll tell you what I'm working on to change what I have right now, to where I'm going to it is, if you think about the space like this, what I'm about to do is first, and I'm waiting actually, it's a little expensive. It's not super expensive, but it is expensive enough that there's other things that I'm buying first. That's what's delaying it right now. But basically, my plan is to put a grid. So I'll put a speed rail grid across here, like this. So about every 3 feet, put crosses in there, and then in the corners you just they have feet for the these are Hollander connectors or whatever. And then what you do is you take little ones, you put little crosses with the feet, and on each side you push the grid against the wall. So you don't have to attach it to anything. It just goes up on the corners, and then you just press it against the wall, and it'll it feels very solid. I've done this before. So it'll feel like it's just part of the ceiling. Because my problem is that my so I'm doing it 10 feet, and then there's another 10 feet that keeps going, that kind of goes into an A-frame after that. So I'm going to cut it off and just have it be a 10-foot grid. So it also depends on how high. If it's 8 feet, if what you got is 8 feet, then Carl's scissors clips work really well. If you get up to 10 feet, I'd put a grid in, because now once the grid is the first thing you put in, because backing into a grid is really hard. It means you have to tear the whole office apart again. So you put the grid in, and to Muddy's suggestion is that you get as much off the ground as you can. Cameras and lights and even mics and everything else, just get it all off the ground so you don't have to think about it. And then what I'm going to be doing is putting a corner desk that is motorized with 2 other desks that kind of go like this, so take up this space here. And then I'm going to put my camera back here. The camera will be on a separate tripod. I don't like attaching a lot of stuff to the desk because you get vibration. So the camera will be on its own tripod. I'm experimenting with using a head, one of the Ronin heads, an older one, that I can just kind of do pan, tilt, and zoom, so that I have like a little less expensive PTZ back there. It doesn't have to be super high performance. I just need to be able to make little adjustments without having to walk around there. I will make sure I have space. I always have at least 24 inches of space between the desks and the wall, so that I can always get back there and I'm not reaching over anything. And then in the back here, I already have a lot of shelves, and so I'll probably just continue to do the shelving thing. But what's nice about this is as I kind of work this out, this angle here, this is about the angle you'll get in the corner. It'll just feel a lot. The space looks pretty big now, but it'll feel really big when I'm giving it all that open space. And then I'm going to have another table back here that I do kind of like little product things with, like here's a close up of this. And that's going to be, to Muddy's point, on wheels. And I'll just move that out of the way when I don't want it, but bring it in. And that way it's kind of like my other desk is kind of in the background. And, it's kind of, so that's kind of what I'm setting up. The only thing I'm waiting for is the grid. As far as lighting goes, I'm really sold on building big, giant diffusion things and just putting cheap lights behind it. like instead of, I find that to be pretty effective so far. So anyway, so hopefully good luck. Let us know what you do. And by the way, the most important thing is make sure you put lots of diffusion in there so you don't have a lot of, the worst thing is roominess. So that's the thing that kills you. So finding ways that I'm probably going to put in eventually I'll put in probably Rose brand curtains that go around that I can be kind of sitting at 50% fullness and kind of pull them, close things up and down based on what I need. Next question.
Got one in from Taylor Sunderhouse in Cincinnati, Ohio, and he asks, I am planning a trip to NAB. Who is going to NAB this year? I
sure hope so. We're hoping to go to NAB. Hoping to do another coverage of NAB. My production schedule is unknown at the moment. It's either going to be really open to really busy, and I just don't know which yet. But I don't know how much control I'll have in my schedule, so that's the only thing that's up in the air for me. So, but otherwise, I'm definitely planning to go. Next question.
Got one in from Douglas Carmichael, and he asks, wouldn't fixed EQ points like those on the Big Six be less useful for live event work than fully parametric EQ?
Good, Carl.
So this is true. So remember that the EQ, I know Douglas is saying in live, the Big Six is not a live mixer. It's a console. So this console is for recording and for summing mixing. It's for Project Studios. Live mixer, get a Wing, get an X32, get an M32. SSL make their own live mixers as well. Take a look at SSL's own live mixers. This is not a live mixer. This is not for sound reinforcement. This is not for live streaming. So it's not for broadcast. If you want high-end broadcast, again, SSL make those. Get a Struder. SSL make, a Tempest. So just put in SSL Tempest, Douglas, and you'll go down a rabbit hole and, $250,000 later. So that's kind of where you're at for live streaming. And for live stuff, they have their own live stuff again. So I think the equivalent in the same price would be a Wing, maybe a Wing Compact would be kind of what you'd want to do if you want to do like sound reinforcement and streaming. For live stuff, this is an analog console. There's no recall. This is for recording and for summing mixing. Now, as far as the EQ, there is, so this is known, SSL know this, and so every input has an insert. So all the inserts can be hooked up to an EQ, and SSL have an EQ for this particular console. So this is it. It's a UV EQ, and this gives you ridiculously parametric control. This is one of the best kind of parametric EQs on the market right now. This is essentially, there's a lot more going on in this than you can see. So if you read the manual, you'll find out, like if you do different combination of button presses, you'll get to a lot more features. But I'd suggest looking into this, Douglas, because you can actually put one of these on each of the channels if you do want to do heavy EQ. And so if you want a parametric EQ, this is kind of the way you want to look at it. And SSL, they saw your question and they made this for that exact reason.
Next question.
Got one coming in from Paul Wallace, and Paul says, take a look at pixeltope.com and discuss the potential of their background segmentation tool called Reveal.
Yeah, I took a look at this. It looks fine. This is the, let's see, they show some of the stuff here. The problem really is that it all, it looks okay, but a lot of this is pretty hard keys. So they're like, oh, you don't need to have green screen. It would just take it. It'll just remove it. But when you actually look at it, I mean, when you look at it as a person who does a lot of compositing, you're like, it's okay. like not doing it without a green screen isn't the same as doing it with a green screen. So there's a lot of, it shows, there's a couple shots here that are a little, again, as I don't need to look very closely, I can just tell you that these are really tight. These are really like smooth keys, and they become more clear that they're smooth keys when something goes behind them. There was a couple of these where there's just the keys are pretty hard, and they're hard because there's no green screen. So, but I admit that I'm one of the people, I don't even like 422 green screen. Like, so I have to admit I've done, hundreds and hundreds of hours of 444 and raw green screen. And so as a result, I'm pretty touchy about hair and stuff like that. So with this, it's fine. I just find that the problem with digital sets in general is that it just, people don't know why it doesn't look right. It just doesn't look right in their head. And that's for a variety of reasons. The focal length doesn't match. The lighting doesn't match. The chroma doesn't match. There's lots of things that don't match. And the edges of their hair and their body are smooth. And people won't consciously understand what they're looking at, but it doesn't feel right. I often tell people, just go back to analog sets. I get that it's easier to do green screen, but you really got to nail it. Like, you need an Ultimat, you need to shoot at 4K to go down to 1080p. You need to light it well. You need to have good cameras, good lighting. You need to match the focal length of your foreground camera with your background plates, like all of those things. Or again, it feels weird to the person that's there. They don't notice it. They just feel it. People feeling stuff is way more powerful than people understand. Like, it's more powerful than them noticing it, because if they feel like it's a little off, they devalue it subconsciously. And that is it lives in a place that you can't get to. Like, it's literally in like a little box. It's like a little treasure chest of like, they just don't feel something about it. And that's why I think people got tired of, a lot of visual effects. Like, a lot of the films that had all these visual effects is that they had smooth, edges, and the physics didn't work, and they couldn't tell you what it was. Like, when you look at Tenet or you look at Dune, which had no visual effects, like, we didn't use any visual effects. That just means they spent enough money to do it right. There's plenty of visual effects in there. So the thing is that, but what they did is they poked at it until it was really correct, and that you could see all the hair and you could see all the details and everything else. But I think that's one of the big problems. Next question.
Got one in from Jeff Veely in Henderson, Texas, and he says, any tips on setting up an Ultimat for a newbie and lighting a green screen with about 5 feet of space between the screen and the talent?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I seem to keep suggesting these guys a bit, but my friends at Socially You, I've done some stuff with them before, but they've got a master chroma keying video on how to set up the Ultimat. So that I've got a bunch of Ultimats myself. I go through and just have a look at it and grab some tips there. But in terms of, Alex was talking about a lot of this just before. 5 feet of space is not a lot of space, but you want to have as much separation as possible. Have not plenty of backlight, enough backlight to try and keep that separation happening, and keep everything soft. And going through these videos, they'll talk about what lighting levels you want for things. Get the green as flat as possible in terms of the same luminance across the whole screen. But yes, trying to match whatever your background is with your front ground lighting is going to make a huge difference as well, because if it doesn't match, it's just not going to look any good.
Good, Carl.
So I can talk to the lighting side of this. I've helped people do green screen in the past. I don't use green screen myself, but the lighting side is something I'm pretty good at, because lighting is something I do pretty much every day when I work. So I actually made a calculator. So this is a lighting calculator. So I stands for intensity of light, and you can see it's lux, and then you can see D is distance. So essentially all I need to know is how large is your green screen, and how far away can I get the lights away from the green screen. So if you're saying it's 5 feet depth, and then I can do 5 feet, I could probably do 4.5 feet, and then you can make sure it's blocked, so you can put up essentially flags to stop any light hitting you that's not hitting the green screen. And then this little calculator here uses, essentially it's just an inverse square calculator that's designed for green screens, and I can find two lights, and essentially, and it's just a bunch of numbers, but really what this calculator does, it tells me how far away. So if you draw out like a floor plan, you got your green screen, let's say your green screen is 2 meters across. So yeah, let's say it's actually 10 feet across. Let's keep it round numbers. So 10 feet across, how far out should the lights be? And so you can do side lighting if you've got a more of a tight shot. If it's a full body shot, then you have to do bottom and top lighting. So if you've seen green screens in a studio, you'll notice there'll be a whole bunch of lighting on the floor as well as on the ceiling, and they'll both be the same distance away from the green screen. And so this inverse square calculator that I've got here that's designed for green screen tells me how far away the lights have to be from the actual green screen, and how far away how far away they are from each other. So how far away each light is from it. So let's say it's 10 feet. So let's say we're doing vertical lights. So we've got lights on light stands. We've got two vertical lights lighting up a green screen for something like my background. Then I know that essentially it's the square root of 2. So the square root of 2 of the radius, so it's kind of, we're going to use radius. It sounds weird for a background to use a radius, but from the center point of your green screen to the edge of your green screen in the frame. So what's the edge of the green screen in the frame? It doesn't have to be in the frame, but you're going to need more light if you go beyond that. So let's say it's 5 feet across, then it's just simply 5 times the square root of 2, and that's it. That's how far out the lights are away from the green screen. Both lights need to be exactly the same distance, they need to be the same power, and they need to be in the center of, essentially the center. So this is where these long tube lights, so you see these long tube lights, they're actually quite good because they give out the even light from top to bottom, because that's the actual thing you need to do. You need to make sure it's an even light. So long tube lights, strip banks can do it as well. So you can have like a point source like a COB and put a strip bank, so a 5 foot by 1 foot strip bank. So essentially it's a softbox, top of softbox, you can do that as well. But you need the calculator to know at what point is the light on the edges of the screen exactly the same intensity on the light in the very center of the screen, knowing you have two lights. So each light is going to add light to the center, and one light is going to add far less light to the far right, but the left light is going to. So that's why my calculator I have here, it tells me exactly how far away, how bright the light can be. The brightness doesn't really matter. It just tells me how bright it can be, and that's essentially what this calculator does. It tells you how far away from the green screen it has to be, and so it has a target. So essentially the brightness here is a target brightness. That's the far number on the right hand side. So what brightness do you want your green screen to be? And and then you put in that number, and it will tell you what brightness each light has to be to get to that number. So as far as lighting, it's square root of 2. So inverse square law.
So I don't do any of the math. So I leave Carl to the math. I'll show you a couple pictures of some of the stuff that we've set up that are different sizes of it. So this is kind of you can see very high tech. This is PVC pipe. Now, one of the things we swear by is using composite components. I think that was mentioned by Jeff as well. So he's using composite components, green screen. That's all I use when I'm doing, and I use their paint. There's something about the green that keys better. So these are all tied. I can go a long time of how I tie them because it's very important, but I don't have time. I don't have a way to show it to you, but I tie it in a way that I can very quickly pull it off. And then what's hidden behind here are this is the two greens, the two Kinoflows in this case. And the big thing is that what we tend to do is, if you think about a green screen here, I have a Kinoflow typically on each side, and they're pointed at the far corner. So they're not pointed in. You'll get hot spots that if you point. The temptation, of course, is to do this and then have this one pointed kind of like this, and this one pointed kind of like this to kind of cover them. But that never works. So you have to take them here. And now, oftentimes, if let's say this is 5 feet, you are putting the person right here. They will be just behind where that person is, but we flag them. So we flag them off to make sure that they're not getting any of the light, because a lot of times what we're doing is these are green bulbs. So they're green bulbs or green LEDs. It's what we call green on green, and it makes it much more pure across the top of the back. But you have to be very careful to not overrun it. So for instance, so one of the things you want to think about is when you think about RGB parade. So I'm not going to do these in colors, but well, maybe I can. Hold on. So you got your red, and then you've got your green, and then you've got your blue. And so what you're looking for is, in this case, what we're trying to do is get a minimum distance in the RGB parade. I don't like that white. A minimum distance here of 40 points out of 100. So as a 0 to 100 scale, we want the top of the green and the top of the red, when we look at it, to be 40 points apart. You can do that with regular white lights. It's hard. When you do it with green on green, what you'll see is something that looks a lot like this. It'll be like red down here, and then you'll see green that's like this, and then you'll see blue that like this. And the reason the RGB parade is so important is it's easy for you to, when you're doing a green screen, is to run your green over top of 100, because you're looking at it. If you look at it a lumiscope, or you're looking at it through a camera, you can peek your green, and you can tell that it's peaking because it flattens out. And suddenly you'll see parts of it that just look perfectly smooth. And that means that the green, not the overall image, but the green part of the overall of the image is being overexposed. It's just it hit 100%. So if you see flat parts, that's not good. So we try to have in that green on green, we try to have it be 70%. Green is at 70%, and then the red and blue oftentimes are in 20%. If it's not green on green, if it's irregular, that they'll be closer. It'll be green will still be at 70. They'll be at 30 or 40 each, as best you can. So that's one part of that puzzle. You generally don't want the greens to be significantly higher than the foreground. So people have this thing where it should be one stop below or one stop above. If it's too bright, you have to also think about your background. But if it's too bright, it's gonna overexpose. And the more you get, the closer the green screen is to your person and the brighter it is, the more you're going to get spill across them, because it's a big light. And so the brighter that is. And so the further away you can get the person, we do ones, if I've got room, I'll make them 10 feet apart, 10 feet away, just because then what happens is that if you think about the foreground person, the light waves are going more straight when they're going towards you. You're not seeing the ones that come down from behind them. So those are things to think about there, but it's really, I can't light a green screen without scopes. So I literally won't do it. I won't do it for work. I will not do a green screen that I'm getting paid for without scopes. And those scopes specifically are my RGB parade and my overall lumiscope. So the lumiscope, basically in the scope, when you're looking at the green screen, when you're sitting in a scope, you want to see something that looks a lot like that. That's what when you're setting for someone who's standing and doing something, that's what it should look like all the time. And if you're doing, we used to do about 10 or 11 hours a week of green screen. And so if we got off, it was a bad thing. It was very expensive for us. So that's why we were so specific about it. If you look at some of these other ones, you can still see another setup there. Remember, I'm only shooting above them there. So there was some that might stand. What I try to avoid, if I don't have to, is I won't shoot their feet. If you shoot their feet, all the rules change. So you get into something like this is a green screen here. And now, there's just a lot of complexity to what we're going to do. You can't make this whole green screen that smooth. And so you're doing the best you can. The key isn't going to be as good. It's going to be a lot more work. There's going to be a lot more roto. So it just really depends on the scale at which you're doing green screen. Next question.
Next one in from Jeff Simmons in St. Louis, and he asks, I've been trying to buy parts to build out a PC using PC Part Picker, benchmarking sites, digging through deals, and falling down rabbit holes. Any tips to maintain my sanity?
Good guy.
Yeah, go to PugetSystems.com and select one. They have them there by type. So you could say if you want to do Premiere or Resolve, you just drop down and then it'll give you the selection. The nice thing about those guys is that they really do write blog posts and test their findings. They put them up with side by sides as to what they found out, where thermal throttling and just all the stuff that you talk about with the rabbit hole, because it is easy to go down. If you don't need something so hardcore, a lot of folks in our community have been happy with the Minis Forum MSO1. I did just pick up their other model because I wanted something with a GPU, which is this guy here, the it's called the Atom Man MSO Atom Man 7. And the reason why I got this one is it feels so fast. And that's the other thing is I bought a computer off the shelf at Best Buy to run Zoom, what was it, Zoom MISO, I think it was when it first came out. And so I walked in the store and bought this thing and it had lots of bloatware. But this thing, no bloatware. A Windows Pro came on it, and there's something about having a super clean system. But the other neat thing about this thing is it's got an Oculink port, which allows you to put an outboard GPU later on. If you do, so this, you can barely see it here, but this is a 4090 attached to this little sled thing that attaches to the Oculink port. So it's $639 for the Adaman, and we're using it with NDI bridge. So we've got it where it's got two 2.5 gigabit connections coming into it. The MSO1 has a 10 gigabit or two 10 gigabit ports, but I'm just using this one with two 2.5s to run NDI bridge, and it seems to be doing pretty well. We've tested it with, I've got 3 PTZs that are on it, plus a couple other NDI cameras and sources, and it seems to be cruising along pretty good. And you can return it if you buy it off Amazon if it doesn't work out for you. I'd also recommend looking at Linus Tech Tips if you do want to go further down the rabbit hole. He's got a few computers that are pretty recent that he went to Japan and had them build something out, and it was pretty interesting to see what all they shoved in that thing. And then he gave the thing away. It's like $4,000, $5,000 computer. The other thing, one more, having multiple computers, like mine's chewing on something right now that says it's going to render in a day and a half. So I'm glad that I have multiple computers, and I could just use Splashtop, and I can go into that computer and I can look at it's chewing, and I just go and not feel like I'm completely bogged down having to use a machine that's rendering something, and all of a sudden everything else just goes to a crawl. So having multiple computers and just be a way that they're going to become obsolete. So whatever you spend on today, you're probably going to buy something in a year or two that's going to be 4 times as fast. And then think about cloud. There's shadowpc.com for $39 a month, where you could just rent computers, and it's all you can eat for $39. So consider that.
Good, Carl.
So exactly what Guy said, yeah. So there are sites that actually do this where they have all the different combinations and have done tests. The other thing is take a computer that's made by manufacturers, so make it maybe a work, if you want something that's more powerful, like a Dell workstation or a HP workstation, so one of these more expensive ones that have high-end components. Simply take a look at the components, essentially the chipsets. Don't worry about the brand so much, but the chipsets that are in there, and just reverse engineer and just go pick the brand of chips with the same chipset to get similar specs, but you may save yourself 20-30% on price because you're not using the Dell version or the HP version of that board with that chipset. You're using the Gigabyte version or the MSI version, whichever. So you can reverse engineer a built computer from one of the bigger manufacturers that is essentially workstation level computing, and just reverse engineer that with cheaper components with the exact same chipsets. So that's another way of doing it.
All right, now we are jumping into our content segment of the show. So we're looking for recommendations from each of our panelists about content. And I'm going to start with Guy. Guy, do you have a recommendation for us?
The dog ate my content. Give me a minute. Let somebody else. I'll come up with
Ryan, do you have a choice of some content people should check out?
I couldn't think anything tech related, but my wife and I are
it doesn't have to be anything.
enjoying
Music, shows. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, my wife and I are enjoying Silo. So it's
good, isn't it?
Season 1 a year ago or so, and I've just started releasing season 2. So I've been looking forward to every Friday having that come out. But I've been enjoying that.
I tried with Silo to, I had a whole plan. So I figured they're going to be done by the end of January. So if I start watching every day at the beginning of January, by the end of January, I'll be on the last one. Like I won't have to wait for any weeks in between. I start with the very first episode of the first one. So I get all caught up in my head. And then I go into the second one and I experience it all again. But I couldn't do it. I just started watching it. I waited like 2 weeks and I was like, I can't do this. And so we sat down and started watching it. It's really good. It's good stuff. It's good. It's good show. Yeah, I agree with you.
On Apple TV Plus as well for those wanting to watch it.
It's on Apple TV. I think it's the only place it is, right?
Yeah, that's only where it is. It's just if you're looking for it, that's where it is.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really it's a good show. The fun thing to watch about Apple is that you just feel like spared no expense when you're watching it. As a production person, you're just like, man, they threw a lot of money at that. in every place, they're just like there's just like cash like coming out of the cracks. Like there's so many little details to silo, and the again, as someone who's worked on film and production and everything else, you're just like, wow, that was really expensive, to do that. And then so it's good. It's really fun to watch Apple shows because you may like the story or not. That's the question, but you will not complain about the production quality ever. So yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So my suggestion is technically a YouTube channel and also on Nebula. So Nebula is like, $3 a month, $2 a month. So they're called Mustard. So Mustard is created by two brothers. They do animation and they also do scripts and everything else. But all the animations are done by these guys. It's pretty cool. So essentially what they are is they're essentially under engineering, but they're a lot more than that. So they look at essentially craft, so mainly aircraft, but there are others as well. They do boats and they do trains and stuff like this, but what they actually do is they say how it works, but the more important thing is why did this thing ever exist in the first place, and they usually go quite deep into that. You find that half the episode is what situation arose for this thing to come into being, and why did it exist and why does it no longer exist. The vast majority of things on their channel no longer exist. So it's really fascinating to see the engineering and really fascinating to understand why these things came into being. A lot of the stuff comes out of the Soviet Union and out of America during the Cold War. There are others as well, but if you're into engineering and you're into why certain modes of transport are made, so they do go into military craft and civilian craft in this. So obviously like large hovercrafts for transport, jet-powered trains, rocket-powered trains. So jet-powered trains is quite an interesting one. The Nautilus, so most people don't understand there actually was a submarine called the Nautilus. It's a whole interesting episode in itself. So there's really interesting channel. As I said, YouTube, you do get a few more extra episodes on if you do get Nebula. And of course you don't get the ads. Really the only ads they have in there is like a Nebula ad at the end of their video, which is kind of, so they're simply pointing you towards Nebula at the end of their video. If you've got premium YouTube, it'll be, you just go from video to video, you won't have a problem. You just have a Nebula ad at the end. Nebula, of course, you just don't have that ad. The quality's a little bit better on Nebula. Only a little bit, so it's just a high quality 1080, but you won't notice it so much. But these two brothers, one brother does the narration, and the other brother does a lot of the animation. So one does the script, but they both work on everything together. But these two brothers have created themselves quite a large collection now. The videos are between maybe 6 to 12 minutes. So that's kind of your time span. They do have some more in-depth videos that maybe go to 20 minutes, but that's probably the longest videos they do. When you actually see the animation and you think how much work, so there is almost zero stock images in this. They nearly animate everything to like ridiculous detail. So just pick one video and watch it and you'll understand what I'm saying. They may have some news clippings that they do to show, the product, or the vehicle when it was launched, or, something like that. But generally nearly everything's animated, which gives them a lot of freedom to show it in certain guises and stuff like that. But it's really fascinating when you think of like all the watercraft they do. They have to animate all the water. So they've got to do water physics. And so if you want to take a look at this, and they do have on Nebula, they do have a behind the scenes video they go into. So if you want to do something similar, they'll show you how they do it and what software they use to do it all in, and how they put together, how long it takes them to put a video together as well. They're usually about one a month. So usually about 10 to 12 a year they do. But yeah, so there's a massive back catalogue. So if you're sitting waiting for a coffee, 6 minutes, you can bring up one of these videos if you're interested in engineering and kind of why humans create things to fill a tiny niche, and then get rid of it. And they spend like $200 million just developing it. So it's very interesting.
Go ahead, Muddy. Do you got something for us?
Yeah, right on. So in production, we're dealing with media and content all the time. And often one of the challenges we need to do is to be able to play that. This recommendation is actually about a content playback system that you're familiar with. But the reason I want to highlight this is because we've got inundated with Black Friday deals, but almost always Black Friday deals are for, and Cyber Monday in this case, are for new customers. And I've actually seen several forums where existing customers were kind of frustrated about that. And so PlayOutB 2.1 just came out, and It's a paid upgrade, but if you are an existing customer, you get 40% off, and new customers get 30% off. So I was like, finally, someone rewarding loyalty. And so the way that it works, if you go to updates.playoutb.com and put in your existing license key, it pops up with a message saying you need to pay to upgrade, but here's a special code to get 40% off. You get a few hours left. So anyway, love it, and happy to share.
Great deal. It's a great deal. It's a great product. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'd always heard about Topaz Labs and their photo AI and video AI software and Gigapixel. And I've always been like on the fence come Black Friday to get the 50% off deal. And this time I pulled the trigger, and it was after I downloaded the trial to just see what it would do with some of the productions that I've done over the last year. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. It's just amazing. If you get the right content, it can do miracles, because it does use AI, and you can adjust these sliders where you can move them side to side. So like a dog here, it'll take in the eyeball, and it'll make it look sharper, and you can see here that you can do some of the settings and sharpen the strength at low, medium, high. So there are things that you can do in there to tweak them, and then you can make your own little preset. So once you find a recipe that works, you can save that as a preset, set it up as a key command, and then you could run a whole bunch of photos, because I have just tons of photos, and it's almost a new hobby that I've gotten into now, just taking old photos and just going, what do I do with this? And then going over to some friends that have some stuff and going, hey, this is on your website. Here's what it looks like with this. And they're like, what? So you can take old photographs that may be 700 kilobits or something like that, or kilobytes, and make them 8 megabytes, and now they just look fantastic. Some of them, it does get a little weird. Like if you have the strength up too high, it does get a little too AI, so you want to dial it back. So just be aware that it isn't just batch everything all with the same settings. If you care about the image, you do have to sit there and adjust it. But it's worth trying to download it. It is 50% off for, I think today's the last day, but I got it, so I'm happy. I'm extremely happy with it. Yeah,
it's truly amazing. I've had it for a while for some work that I've been doing, and it's amazing. I've taken, one of the things I like to do is, if you take something like Runway will put out a 720p, and you just throw the 720p in and say, I would like this to be 4K. It takes that and just knocks it right up. It's quite a thing.
I had one that I had some 720 stream footage. I didn't get to record it, but it streamed to live stream. And so I took the archive down and blew it up to 4K. And it was a car event where we had a host and people that were speaking. And the cars just look, I mean, this Countach, the lines, everything in 4K is stunning. And the guy was wearing like this shirt that I thought it would get all fuzzy. It sharpened the shirt that had a bunch of lines. And so even the shirt looked like it was shot in 4K natively. So I was super impressed, because the stream up was 720, and luckily it held the whole time, no glitches or anything. It was when the Bond first came out. Yeah, I was using the Bond back in 2014 and setting this thing up with 5 modems, and it just was perfect stream the entire way. So luckily that archive was able to be resuscitated into 4K. So taking old footage and making it new again is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and the reframing, the retiming stuff that it does is pretty amazing as well. I've taken stuff and gone from like 24 to 60, and it doesn't always work, but for a lot of things, it works really, really well. Fantastic. I'm going to see my media pick is I'm going to see Axe and the Hatchet Men on tomorrow night with my daughter. That's a band that she got me into. It's a lot of fun. It's a fun band. So if you want to check out a kind of a fun new band that you probably haven't heard before, Axe and the Hatchet Men. It's not nearly as violent. They're not nearly as violent as the name implies. It's not heavy metal. It's kind of more of a jazzy, groovy kind of thing. And so we'll let you know how it goes. But that's my content recommendation. Thanks to everyone here for being part of this conversation. We really appreciate you guys coming on and having this great kind of more casual conversation that we have here on Extra Hours. Thanks to the great team on the back end that makes this possible, that figures it out, but also managing the questions and managing all the bits and pieces that make this work, and all the teams that help make these shows work every single day. And finally, thanks to everyone asking all the questions. We really appreciate you throwing those questions in. This is a real short show without your questions. And it's interesting. I was talking to someone about it, and it's the question, it's not just that you're trying to answer your questions, you're contributing to this overall knowledge base that we're constantly building together. So we just really thank you so much for being part of the conversation. And now we will let you go back. I don't know if we have an official way to end this, but let you go back to your regularly scheduled program. So, thanks, everybody. See you later. I don't know how that's supposed to end.